Oh. Okay, good evening, Democrats.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Democrats.
Democrats.
Evening.
Okay, I heard Abby, Dolly, and Dan. I think that's it.
Good evening.
Let's unmute it.
Everyone's
Unmute
muted.
everybody. Yeah. I just clicked on ask all to unmute. Okay, let's try it again. And 3, 2, 1. Good evening, Democrats.
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 Buenas noches.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Great. Perfect. So now I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody again. And we'll begin the meeting. And first of all, I want to ask how everyone's feeling after that huge red wave that hit last week. Maybe a little dry. This was the best performance by an incumbent Democratic president in the midterms since JFK. And the House is still close. It looks like we're probably going to lose it by a few seats. Some media outlets have called that already. But meanwhile, in the Senate, we actually picked up a Senate seat, my home state of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman. Very exciting. And hopefully, as we were just talking about before we started, we'll win for Senator Warnock, and then we'll have 51 seats in the Senate. And it's the first time ever that a president's party did not lose a single state legislature anywhere in the country. In fact, we flipped several state houses from red to blue, including swing states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and a lot more. So it's very exciting election night for Democrats. Lots to get to tonight. That's why we're here. But first, we have some club business to get to. So first of all, just a quick plug. Our annual holiday party is coming up on December 11th at the Santa Monica Brew Works, 4 to 6 p.m. We'll be hosting our annual toy drive. So to come to that event, please bring an unwrapped toy, which we're going to donate to a child in need through our friends at the church in Ocean Park. I see Reverend Janet's here now. And okay, so also back in September, we looked at proposed amendments to our club bylaws, which we try to update every year to keep up with the demands of our growing club. So now we're going to take a vote to adopt those amendments, and here to chair this part of the meeting is this year's Bylaws Committee Chair, Dan Hall.
All right, good evening, Santa Monica Democrats. I know everyone is here for the post-election analysis, but you get to deal with me first. We wanted a captive audience for the vote on the bylaws amendments that the executive board is recommending to the membership. So this is, like John said, this is critical for good governance of the club and for our democratic community here in the city. As I briefed in the last meeting where we noticed the amendments per the bylaws, the vote will be done as a consent calendar. Any member will have the opportunity to pull a proposed amendment via a motion and a second. If you wish to pull something, please identify the section or the line number using the numbers on the left side of the document. I dropped the document in the chat. If there is a motion to pull, we will then vote on whether to pull the proposed amendment. If the motion passes, we will set that amendment and any others that are pulled aside and vote on the remainder of the consent calendar. Once the bulk of the amendments are passed, we will then debate the pulled amendments, if there are any, and then have a separate up-down vote on each of the pulled amendments. So with all of that now briefed, are there any motions to pull any proposed amendments from the document?
Yes.
Jay,
I have
go
my
ahead.
hand. On the Appendix A, under number 1, anti-harassment portion, anti-policy, section B, item 1, verbal conduct, which refers to epithets, derogatory jokes or comments. I have a real problem with the jokes because they are so frequently misinterpreted or could be and unintentional. All the stand-up comedians.
Hey, Jay,
Yeah.
we'll have discussion. So is your motion to pull lines 570 and 571?
Yes, the reference, whatever, I don't have the line numbers in front of me. The
Okay.
reference under jokes, B1, verbal content.
Understood. Is there a second for the motion? Sarah, was that a second? Okay. So motioned by Jay, seconded by Sarah. We have a amendment that is pulled. It's lines 570 to 571 in our anti-harassment policy regarding jokes targeting specific characteristics of a person's identity or appearance, such as religion, race, skin color, gender identity, sexual orientation, etc. I'm going to set that one aside. Are there any other proposed amendments that anyone wishes to pull to discuss and vote on separately? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion from anyone to pass the remainder of the consent calendar.
Motion.
Second,
Thank you, Raina. Thank you, Ted. So moved by Raina, seconded by Ted. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, we're now voting in favor to pass all of the proposed amendments with the exception of lines 570 to 571. All in favor, please raise your hand. A couple trickling in still.
I can't
Hands
figure out
up.
how to do it.
That's okay, Danielle. If you look under on the window, if you go to reactions, and then there should be a raised hand portion. All right, seeing a few trickle in. I'm gonna give it 10 more seconds.
You are over the threshold for
Yep.
passing.
I'm seeing 40. All opposed? If your hand is still up, go ahead and lower it unless you are opposed. I am seeing 4 opposed. 2 opposed. All right, 40 to 2. Any abstentions? Dolly, are you abstaining or is your hand still up? Forty to 2 to 1. All right, that passes. And we will now discuss the lines 570 to 571. Jay, you made the motion. Would you like to
Yes, thank
discuss
you.
why?
Thank you. I'll be relatively brief. The inclusion of the word jokes is extremely problematic. The folks in the stand-up comedian community, I've spoken to 2 or 3 of them, said that from their point of view, it's extremely problematical because humor, as you get into it, as you know, usually is at the benefit or detriment of someone or something. And that including this word jokes in here borders on the whole issue of free speech, and from an ACLU point of view of where we're getting into censorship. The interpretations and the intentions of jokes and humor is fraught with all kinds of problems, as all of you know who have watched particularly stand up, but even all kinds of humor situation and jokes, even though the jokes may be meant in a particularly very, if you want, supportive or conversational manner, there might be interpreted, depending on who's listening to them, in a negative way. The negative and positive happens all the time. And Bill Maher has spoken out about this a number of times on his show, that we cannot be too woke on these issues when it comes to humor. It's a real problem if we are going to hold people to a standard of whether your joke is either misinterpreted or considered abusive or insulting by other people. I just think it's a very, very slippery road to go down. I don't think it should be included, and I think we should either amend that part out of it or have a substitute motion to include everything else except that word. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Unfortunately, due to our current set of bylaws, we can't propose a in the moment amendment to any of the amendments. So if we choose to do that as a club, we'll have to revisit that in at least 30 days.
Can I make a substitute motion to include everything except that word?
No, we cannot.
And can I
The
move?
the proposed, per our current set of bylaws, all bylaws amendments have to be noticed with 30 days. So if we were to do that, we would have to vote on it again in 30 days with the language proposed.
Thank you for that. Can I move to table that, only that one line 570, 571? Can I move to table that?
John, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is a precedent setting motion, right?
Well, we pulled but we voted on everything else. So now we're voting on whether to add this line as well. So I mean, I do think we can have a vote on whether to also adopt this particular 2-line section or not to adopt this 2-line section.
Well,
Right, but I'm saying the motion to table supersedes the discussion, correct?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So we would.
Okay,
I
there's
mean,
been a motion to table. Is there a second? If someone can just say it instead of raising their hand, because there's a lot of hands up. All right, the motion fails for lack of a second. Patricia.
I don't disagree with what stand-up comedians do. I don't disagree that we don't want to be overly restrictive in what we call in terms of speech. I think that speech is one thing, but I think that that stand-up comedians at least pretend like what they say is humorous. And I would like to respond to the letter that we got that was a kick in the teeth to some of us, or kick in the guts, I don't know. But it wasn't an anti-Semitic joke that was sent. It was an anti-Semitic trope that was sent. And that when you bring up ethnicity in an otherwise valuable letter about an issue, to bring up someone's ethnicity and then pretend like it's a joke that you just threw in a statement about a person's background. And when the people who sent the letter were asked to recognize and refrain from such statements, they doubled down, attacked a few of us, and then decided it was a joke after making sure that they did as much damage on the way down. Calling something a joke when arguably there was no humor whatsoever in it further diminishes those whom it hurts. And when I say that they doubled down, is that there was no joke in what was initially said, and when they were asked to back off, when I say that they doubled down, I started receiving hate mail, and I got a fair amount of it, including one that was addressed to my whole family. And so, to call that a joke really diminishes the value of comedy, because humor is a really important characteristic we should all share. And jokes should have just a smidgen of humor in them, and they shouldn't be racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, and on and on and on. So that's all I have to say on it.
I
Thank you,
believe
Patricia.
the motion to table,
Peter?
seconded by John Medlin.
Thank you, Jay. Peter? You're on mute, Peter.
There. I'm just wondering if anyone ran this by a civil rights lawyer, this section.
Several lawyers on the executive board approved of this language.
Okay. All right.
Thank
'cause
you.
It is very narrowly drawn. I mean, I have to say that most of the jokes I've found like that are funny are usually self-inflicted by the humorist. I mean, he or she is making comment about themselves and not about someone else, and that's totally different. So I reluctantly am in favor of this. I reluctantly because nobody should submit someone to that kind of thing. The attack on I think of it's not the same, but I think of the humor, the attempted humor by some Republicans about the attack on Mr. Pelosi, and I found that absolutely disgusting. And I would find this kind of humor disgusting too.
Thank you, Peter. John?
Okay, yeah, I would just like to have this, I believe the motion was to table the vote on this particular withdrawal. I'm not sure of the precedence of that, but I'd like to see that motion. Are we having discussion on the motion to table, or what's the status right now?
We are currently having discussion on the amendment itself, and then we're going to take a yes/no vote on whether the amendment passes. The
So
motion failed for lack of a second.
I second the motion to table, sir.
I did not hear it.
You couldn't hear it because I was unmuted. Everybody was unmuted. I put the thing in the chat thing that I second the motion, so I'm a little confused here, sir.
I am not paying attention to the chat. I asked for anyone who wanted to second it to come off
I was
mute and
waving
speak.
my hands. I was waving my hands and I was muted. Everybody was muted. I was also talking to the machine. So I really think you should go forward with the motion to table, sir. Go ahead with the vote on the motion to table.
Thank you, John. We're not going to entertain that motion because the motion failed. If I asked you to come off mute and you didn't come off mute. Raina,
Jesus Christ, you gotta be kidding me.
Raina will be the last speaker because we are well over time here.
The seconding of the motion was in the chat.
Jay, I asked to come
I
off
just want
mute.
to say that the motion, the second happened after Dan said it had failed. I'm just, that's a fact.
Thank you, John. Go ahead, Raina. You're on mute.
Thank you. I was just going to say, relative to jokes being acceptable or not, I think about the recent situation with an LA city council member who made a joke she thought about a fellow council member's son, African-American son, looking like a monkey. And she thought that it was funny, and people in the room with her laughed and thought that it was funny. And we all know what the outcome of that was. So I feel like if those kinds of jokes are allowed about the way a person looks, about their race, their religion, then this is not the kind of club I want to be a part of.
Thank you, Raina. As always, we appreciate your perspective as the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion. I'm sorry, I do have to cut discussion off there because we're well over time. If you have reservations about the amendment, I recommend you vote no. Is there a motion to pass the amendment of lines 570 to 571?
We have to vote on the motion that's on the floor, right?
No, there's currently no motion. We were in discussion.
Okay.
So I'm entertaining a motion to pass to support Amendment 570, 571.
I'll make that motion.
I moved by Isabel. Is there a second?
Second.
I heard
Natalia.
a second. Thank you, Natalia. Is there any final discussion? Please no. Thank you. We'll call the question. All those in favor of passing the amendment, raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing 33. A couple trickling in still. I'm going to call it in 10 seconds. I have the ayes at 35. Please lower your hands. Any noes? All right, motion pass. Oh, sorry, any abstentions? I have 2 noes. An abstention, 1 abstention. 2. Motion passes 35 to 2. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you bearing with me there. Like I said, this is great for good governance of the club. Thanks, everyone.
Great. And thank you, Dan, for leading this process this year. We really appreciate it. And I also want to thank Jay and John for bringing this issue up. I mean, even though I disagree with your take on it, we certainly appreciate your opportunity to share your perspective on things. So we're going to go to discuss the election results now. And I just wanted to give a brief overview myself before Congressman Liu comes on. First of all, the latest House picture, Republicans picked up 8 seats so far. If they get 1 more, they'll have the majority. They're very likely to get at least a few more. So probably is going to be about 10 pickups for them this cycle. So they'll have a very slim majority, 1 or 2 seats. Democrats also flipped some House seats, 1 in Ohio, 1 in Washington State, which nobody really predicted that were going to go our way. Unfortunately, some of the seats we weren't able to flip were the 27th here in California, where Christine Smith was running against Mike Garcia, and the 45th, where Jay Chen was running against Michelle Steele. Those were 2 of our top targets here in Southern California with the Westside Democratic HQ. Our 3rd top target was the 22nd, where Rudy Salas ran against David Valadeo. That race has still not been called yet, and the results are very close. Looking at our club results, we had a much better track record. Statewide, all of our Democratic endorsed candidates won their election. We have not lost a single statewide race in California since 2006. Gavin Newsom, Eleni Kounalakis, Shirley Weber, Rob Bonta, Fiona Ma, Malia Cohen, Ricardo Lara, Tony Thurmond, and Tony Vasquez all comfortably won. We also re-elected Ben Allen to his 3rd and final term in the Senate, and we elected our new Assembly member, Rick Chavez Burr. Our new U.S. Senator, Alex Padilla, won election to a full 6-year term, and of course, our Congressman, who will be joining us in just a moment, Ted Lieu. Also statewide, the Democratic Club endorsements went 6 for 7 of the ballot measures. The only one that didn't pass was Prop 30, which will take a deeper dive into the measures a little bit later in the evening. At the county level, we successfully ousted Sheriff Villanueva as his challenger, Robert Luna, is leading 60-40, and the ballot measures A and C both passed handily. Measure A is going to provide check on the sheriff, allowing the county supervisors to have stronger oversight and even fire the sheriff for cause if necessary. In the 5 judicial races where we endorsed, 3 of our candidates won: Holly Hancock, Melissa Lyons, and Patrick Hare, and 2 of them fell short. We're still waiting on a call in the county supervisor race, but Lindsay Horvath has taken the lead and continues to expand upon it with each passing update. I don't want to jinx it, but it's looking very good for Lindsay. And this wasn't a race where our club endorsed, but today it became official, so we have to celebrate. Karen Bass will be the next mayor of Los Angeles, the first woman elected mayor of LA, after Rick Caruso spent $100 million to try to convince Angelenos that he was not an anti-choice Republican. Angelenos saw through it. And finally, we have our Santa Monica results. For City Council, 2 of our 3 candidates won by a big margin, Carolyn Tarosis and Jesse Zwick. The race for 3rd place is very close. Lana Negrete is ahead by about 800 votes over Natalia Zernskaya. It may not sound like a lot, but statistically, that's going to be a pretty tough margin to overcome. Of course, we're waiting until all the votes are counted, but it seems likely that Councilmember Negrete will probably win that seat, but we'll see what happens. Rent control board rates, not exactly a big surprise. Erica, Danny, and Kurt all won their election. For the school board, all 4 of our endorsed candidates, Lori Lieberman, Richard Tavilder, and Jess Swain, Stacy Rouse, and Alicia Mignano were elected. And on the college board, Shai Roy, Nancy Greenstein, Tom Peters, and Barry Snell were all elected too. For our local ballot measures, we ran the table. Measures CS, GS, PB, DT, HMP, RC, EM, and SMC are all on track to win. Overall, a great set of results for the club. And of course, we know this only happened because of the hard work that all of you put in to volunteer over the final few weeks of the campaign to bring it home for our candidates. So I want to thank each of you for the work you did to help us reach these results. Finally, I want to say a few words about the tenor of our local election. This club is the home for all Santa Monica Democrats. For a year and 3/4, every 2-year cycle, we're welcoming and inclusive of all perspectives, and we go out of our way to hear from diverse viewpoints. But once the membership makes its endorsements, it's our role as a club to work hard to elect those candidates and to make sure the voters of Santa Monica know about the important issues and factors that will help them make their decisions. We refer to 2 of the council candidates as conservatives, not as a personal attack against them, but because of the conservative policies in their platform. Despite the gaslighting by several candidates in the race and their allies, that is not going negative. It's raising up a significant concern that I've heard from our members consistently over the past year and more about the direction of our city. We want to be an inclusive and welcoming city for all people, not a gated community for only the wealthy, which is a conservative value. Despite this, our opponents went sharply negative against us. There were deceptive mailers sent out that used our club's logo to falsely imply we had endorsed a candidate. Election laws were repeatedly violated by candidates and the PACs who supported them. A council member's wife wrote an op-ed calling the members and leaders of this club racist for opposing a Latina candidate. Anti-Semitic remarks were repeatedly directed toward me and other members of this club. And on election day, the police and other city officials were called on our volunteers to try to stop us from exercising our constitutional right to canvass an electioneer to help get out the vote. These vile tactics are not representative of our Santa Monica values, and it comes as a relief that almost all of the candidates engaging in such tactics were resoundingly defeated. Let's hope that this outcome serves as a warning for those who will run in future elections. And with that, I'm very pleased to welcome our Congressman, Ted Lieu. Ted, congratulations on your reelection. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you for your leadership and for everyone participating today. I was asked to talk about the election results at the federal level, and I'm thrilled to be able to talk about those results because Democrats way overperformed. If you look at recent history, the party controlling the White House usually loses upwards of 28 or more seats. And this time, Democrats have actually held onto the Senate, and possibly we could expand it in December. And we're going to be under single digits in the House. And there's a number of races that have yet to be called. We are very pleased that today they did officially call Mike Levin's race for Mike. And Dave Wasserman has said he's seen enough for Katie Porter to call her race as well. And Josh Harder's race was recently called, so we're bringing back all the California incumbents. And we've got Adam Gray, who I think my sense is it'll be close, but I think he likely wins. And then Rudy Salas in Central Valley, that's going to be close as well. So we're very excited, both in California as well as nationally. I think one reason we did well is because of our messaging. Democrats put people over politics, and we focus on lower costs, better paying jobs, and safer communities. And we're also able to frame Republicans as being batshit crazy. Right? We were able to show that they were extreme, that they wanted to criminalize abortion, they wanted to attack democracy, and they wanted to end Social Security and Medicare in 5 years. And how do we know that? They put it in writing. So American people saw these choices and voted for Democrats in many, many different swing states. Every single contested Secretary of State office in a swing state went Democratic. We also did phenomenally well with our nation's governors. We won the governorships of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona. We also won statewide in a lot of those swing states. And if you're a Republican looking at this, you got to be pretty concerned, because in 2024, if we hold on to Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona, there is no path to victory for any Republican candidate for president. So these were really, really good results. I think if you actually looked at Obama and you looked at Clinton, they lost like 50, 60 seats in the midterm. And so we're obviously disappointed we couldn't hang on and hold the majority, but because it's such a small number of seat differential, we believe we will take this back in 2 years. We did less well in New York for a number of specific local and state-specific reasons that will go away in 2 years in a presidential. So in a presidential, New York is going to act like a blue state. And there were 4 congressional seats that Biden won by fairly high margins that we believe we can take back. There's also going to be 3 states that are going to go to challenges in terms of redistricting because they drew seats that violated the Voting Rights Act in terms of excluding African Americans. We believe we're likely going to win some of those cases, and that would help us as well. Also, California in the presidential also will have higher turnout. So even though we came close in some of these seats and didn't take it this time, I believe in 2 years, we have a pretty good shot of trying to flip those seats again. And so with that, happy to answer any questions you may have. And thanks so much for having me here.
Thank you so much, Congressman. And you addressed some of my questions, but I did want to say that, you know, one factor that Obama and Clinton did not have in their first midterm was you in the office. So I know that you spent a lot of this past year traveling around the country, helping to elect a lot of these candidates. Who are some of the new members of the freshman class that you're most excited about their win that, you know, we should know about?
So I did have the opportunity to this year travel across our beautiful country, and I helped actually over 50 candidates, and I'm very excited about this incoming freshman class. They are incredibly talented. They are energetic. They are diverse. We've got the youngest member of Congress, Maxwell Frost, coming in from Florida. Maxwell and I are going to start what's known as the 0.5 selfie caucus. So those of you who don't know what a 0.5 selfie is, that's okay, because I didn't know what that was either until just a few months ago. So it's a particular way to take a selfie that extends your arm out and has this interesting angle, sort of fishbowl effect. So you still don't know what I'm talking about. You can Google it and learn how to take it. We've got amazing members coming in from a lot of different places that you normally wouldn't expect. So even though Mary Peltola won a special election earlier, the fact that we have someone from Alaska is pretty amazing. She's doing really well in her runoff in Alaska, because Alaska actually has a ranked choice voting system. So she's ahead right now. And it's just pretty clear that when they go to drop off the person with the least amount of ballots, that a number of those are going to go to Mary, and she's going to win again and continue serving in Congress as a freshman. from Alaska. So she's super cool. And I love all my California colleagues. Cindy Kumlager is going to be fantastic. Robert Garcia. We're still looking forward to potentially, Adam Gray coming in. But we got some really cool members of Congress from California. And I'm very excited to serve with the entire freshman class.
Great. So if the results play out, I mean, some places have already called it. Looks like the Republicans are going to take a slim majority, maybe 1 or 2 seats. What does that look like in a practical sense going forward? How do the Democrats combat the Republican agenda with such a narrow margin? What do we do? What's the strategy?
So Speaker Pelosi has said that essentially the following phrase, diversity is our strength and unity is our power. And so if we can stay unified, they'll be very helpful, because then what that means is if Republicans can't sort of count on defections from the Democratic caucus, then they're going to have to get, 98% of their members to vote a certain way. And when you've got crazy people in their caucus, they may not be able to pass much of any significance. So you've got an entire Freedom Caucus that is sort of off the deep end. Over 30 of them did not support Kevin McCarthy for speaker. So if they're not going to support a speaker, it's not clear that when he goes to them and says, "Hey, I need you to vote for this bill," that they're going to respond to him. So I don't know what's going to happen on their side. There could be a lot of chaos.
So I know there was the vote in the Senate today for McConnell versus he had a challenge in his leadership, Rick Scott, and that was beaten back. McConnell was able to win. So do you think that Kevin McCarthy will be able to muster 218 votes to become the speaker, given that he has his challenger, Andy Biggs, who is from the Freedom Caucus, and I'm guessing he's going to be able to get a similar number, like you said, maybe 40 votes to go against him. If that happens and there's a second vote, do you think it will end up being McCarthy? Would they try to do a compromise? Not that everything the Republicans are going to do, but what do you think? How do you see that playing out?
So you're asking me to think like a Republican member of Congress? I have no idea. Matt Gaetz has already said he's not going to vote for McCarthy. So who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? It remains to be seen.
Great. Okay. Well, I have one more question for you, a little bit off topic, but we wanted to get your take on what's happening with Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter. Years ago, we in this club gave you the nickname of Tweetin' Ted. I've seen it catch on. Do you think that we may have to start calling you TikTok Ted or maybe LinkedIn Lou?
Oh, that's really funny. Thank you. So after I log off this wonderful meeting, I'm gonna go ahead and download my Twitter. You can download, by the way, your Twitter posts into an archive. So I'm gonna do that because I don't know how long Twitter is gonna be around. So we'll see.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, wherever you go, we'll follow you to that new social media platform, and we'll come up with the new nickname at that point. But we want to thank you so much for your leadership. Thanks for stopping in today. Thanks for your insight, and most importantly, thanks for all of your work this year that you just described to keep this as close as it was, and we're going to have a really interesting couple of years, I think.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Great, thank you. So now we'll hear from our esteemed retiring Assembly member, Richard Bloom. Richard, thanks for being here.
Ooh, esteemed.
So,
how's everybody doing?
We're doing good.
Cheers to you, everybody.
It could have been a lot worse, given what the media was saying. So we're feeling pretty good about the results.
I think things are generally damn good.
Yeah, I agree.
Compared to what they could be. So I think that's sort of the new mantra for Democrats is could have been so much worse.
That's true. Yeah. So congratulations. You've made it through 10 years in the legislature. You've seen a lot of ups and downs during your tenure. What's coming to mind?
It's all been ups. It's all been ups. I haven't seen any downs. Actually, the Great Recession got in the way of my term on the city council, but pretty much for 23 plus years, I've had very good fortune in helping to improve first Santa Monica and now the state. Even during the Great Recession, Santa Monica fared a lot better than other communities around because of a good budgeting decisions and a strong business community here. So I feel very blessed for the time that I've had in elected office. It's really been great. Honestly, John, for me, I haven't had a down year.
That's great to hear. That's great. I've had a couple of down years in that time, so I'm glad to hear that.
Well, lay out on the couch here and let's talk about that.
Yeah,
John.
yeah, okay, yeah. So you'll of course be succeeded in the assembly by Rick Chavez Burr, who was endorsed by this club as was endorsed by you.
Rick is terrific.
Yeah, what advice have you had for Rick about what he should focus on moving forward, how to be the most effective assembly member?
Well, of course, I want him to keep all my initiatives going, but he has to focus on what he's passionate about at the state level, and really, the economic circumstances of the city notwithstanding. Even here in Santa Monica, the world is our oyster. We can weigh in as legislators, as local government officials on practically any issue you want to, and it's everything from the environment to housing for me, and I even got to name a California state dinosaur. So there's lots he'll be able to do depending on what his passion is, but that I think that's what every legislator has the opportunity to do in California and should do.
Great. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we're looking at the 2022 election results, specifically here in California. What are your biggest takeaways of? How do you think we did across the state? What are some of the most important results?
We did great. Let me, just before I answer that question,
Sure.
I want to shout out to Louis Abramson, who ran against Rick, who's somebody to keep your eye on. He's a great human being. Ran a really good campaign, and I really give him a lot of credit for sticking it out and being honorable and an incredibly decent person. He does a lot of volunteer work in Hollywood on homelessness, and he's an amazing human being. So just
Absolutely.
We're really kind of doubly blessed in that race. We had two great candidates, and I know Rick felt him nipping at his heels the whole way through. But I'm glad that Rick won, but Louis great. So the well, statewide worked out great. Malia Cohen, was called in the winner in her race today, and so we really covered. We ran the table, as they say, and it's pretty damn good. It's a real blessing for us here in California, and we did good in the which ones are yet uncalled, but I know we've maintained or increased our numbers a little bit in the assembly. There's still a couple of Republicans left.
We'll get to them eventually.
Can I tell you?
Okay, so now
That way.
Sorry, I don't know. There might have been I might have missed you there. Did you say, what did you just say?
No, I'm waiting for you, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Patiently.
So you've served under 3 assembly speakers during your tenure: John Perez, Tony Atkins, and Anthony Rendon. And earlier this week, the
Correct.
Democratic caucus had a long meeting. I went 5 or 6 hours, there all day. And they eventually, the white smoke came out and they determined that Robert Rivas would become the new speaker starting next year, one of your colleagues. So what is your take on this decision? What kind of speaker do you think he might be compared to the recent ones we've seen?
Well, I wasn't in the room,
Sure.
and so I can't speak to what happened during the meeting. It was a lengthy one. We had another lengthy one a few months back that I was present for. But I know Rob Rivas personally. I think he was elected unanimously, obviously with some push and pull. I think he'll make a great speaker when the time comes, and I think Anthony Rendon has been an outstanding speaker. He's been my leader now for several years, and I look up to him. He's intelligent. He's done a good thing. I think it's to some degree controversial by pushing power down to committee chairs. Of course, it sounds good to me because I was a committee chair. But it's, I think, really helped us to broaden our impact and get a lot done. So this will, the leadership change, to somebody new is always, in my experience, well, twice that there was a leadership change, but when I came in, John Perez was already speaker, so he and I had to get used to one another. As he likes to tell people, I spend $1 million to defeat Bloom, and that's affected my behavior going forward. But John and Tony and Anthony have been absolutely outstanding leaders in the legislature, and they've enhanced my ability to accomplish things in Sacramento, and a large reason that they are collectively a large reason for the success that I've had. My staff tells me that over 10 years, I had 140 plus bills signed. I find that hard to believe, but that's what they tell me.
That's impressive.
Including the California state dinosaur. Does anybody know the dinosaur's name?
Why don't you tell us?
Thank you for asking, John. Augustine Oliphus Morrissey. You all want to repeat after me? No, I won't make it.
I don't think Augustine. Augustus.
Good
Morris?
start. Augustine Oliphus.
Oliphus.
Augustine Oliphus Morrissey.
Morrissey. Like
I'll give you John, I'll give you a private lesson. Don't worry.
Great. Sounds good. Patricia, did you have a question for Assemblymember Bloom?
No, I just had a quick comment. And Richard, I went to your webinar today on eviction and helping tenants keep from being evicted. And I know that all 3 of our new rent control board members signed up for it. I hope they all got there. It was very helpful, and I appreciate that. And I also appreciate your shout out to Louis Abramson. I wish I could have voted for both of them.
Multi-member districts may be something to think about.
Don't tell Rick.
Right. Yeah, definitely not. But yeah, no, I mean,
is Rick on the Zoom? I know
he's coming
later.
Yeah, he'll be here.
Not there yet.
I don't know if he's I'm not seeing his name yet.
And Rick was always gracious throughout this entire race, even though he was pretty sure he was going to win, but he was always gracious to Louis, and that was really nice too.
If you think about it, Patricia, it's really unusual to see a race like that. Really unusual. Most often, people are going at each other's throats.
Yeah,
and it can get even worse when it's a Dem on Dem race, as we've seen.
They both ran really positive issue-based campaigns. It was really nice to see, and like Patricia said, Rick has been, after he already got the club's endorsement and already was doing really well in Santa Monica, he came to our rally for rent control, and he's been a really good advocate for us already before he's even been sworn in. So we're lucky to have him. I wanted to ask you about, because of course we remember
Well,
you.
Rick's worried that he doesn't have enough support in Santa Monica. So just keep him thinking that way and he'll keep coming back.
Sure. Well, I heard from Rick that he did very well in Santa Monica in the general election.
Don't tell him that.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we'll keep him on the razor's edge. So we wanted to ask you, speaking of Santa Monica, we remember, of course, you were a council member and mayor for years before you're in the assembly. So while we have you
Good
here,
times.
what is your take on the election results here in Santa Monica? Of course, we're going to dig deep into that in a couple of our speakers in a few minutes, but while we have you here, what's your take on how the election panned out here?
Well, again, much better than it could have been. So I'm pretty pleased with the results, and I think we're going to see a progressive resurgence over the next few years on the city council, and that's a good thing.
Great. Well, we're really glad to hear from you. Congratulations on your retirement from the assembly. We'll look forward to see what comes next in your career. I know right now you're probably not thinking about anything except for relaxing by the pool for a few days, but we'll look forward to seeing what comes after that.
Thinking about a bunch of things, but we'll save that for another time.
Sounds good. Well, you're always welcome back here to pitch us when the time comes. Thanks a lot, Richard.
Thank you. It's good to see you all. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Richard. So now we're going to go to Irene Cow from the Courage Campaign. Irene, thanks for joining us.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. So before we get into the specific races and outcomes and trying to divine some meaning from the results, can you just let us know about the Courage Campaign's overall role in California elections? What are the races or issues where you were most focused this cycle, and what kind of advocacy work does the organization participate in?
Sure, yes. So a lot of folks know Courage California probably through our work on marriage equality and fighting against Prop 8 back in the day. And we still do some advocacy around LGBTQ issues, but we've always been sort of like a multi-issue statewide organization, and we have long focused on progressive politics. So we are all about getting our members and partners really activated year-round in politics. So not just electing progressive members to the state legislature and other offices, but also trying to hold them accountable as well. So folks may know we have our Courage Score, which is our annual report card of state legislators. And of course, relevant to tonight's conversation, we also have our Courage Voter Guide, which we launched the full guide in 2020. And so, but we also get folks out for sort of issue-based campaigns, and especially around corporate accountability. In the last couple of years, we've taken out fights with Nestle about some water issues here in California, and more recently also on Amazon around environmental justice and worker abuses as well. And so really it's just about trying to balance the levers of justice and power here in California, because obviously it's rigged towards certain folks in power. And so our electoral work really in the state legislature, it's you guys are familiar with this, right? Not just getting Dems elected, but good Dems and progressive ones, especially because we've seen some of the worst corporate Dems act in the way that we would expect Republicans in any other state. And so for us, we're just really excited to try to push the progressive caucus to be larger in the state legislature, and also I'm trying to elect more folks who are champions and obviously not in the pocket of corporations. So specifically, as I mentioned, the Courage Voter Guide, this year, we ran it for both the primary and the general election. As part of our voter guide work, we endorsed about 14 candidates in the primary, a lot of them at the local level, because of course there are a lot of contested sheriff and district attorney races that were decided in the primary. And then in the general election, we focused a lot on the state legislature because of course, full cycle with our Courage Score, trying to get more progressives elected and then holding them accountable. So for our Courage Voter Guide, we covered about 210 races up and down the ballot. We covered every single congressional race, every single state legislative race. and quite a few local races and ballot measures as well. We reached about 225,000 voters around the state of California, which is pretty good, not as great as we did in 2020, but kind of to be expected for a midterm election. And one of the things we're most excited about is about half of the voters who use our voter guide are between the ages of 18 to 34. So, right, like a really key demographic, and a demographic that we know from our polling that we've done over the last year, who tend to be more progressive, but tend to not have as much information about elections and are unsure of where candidates stand on different issues. And so getting the voter guide into their hands, of course, is really important.
Of course, yeah, and we appreciate the work that you all do for that voter guide. Okay, so we're looking at the results at the state level, meaning the statewide offices and the legislature. What are your biggest takeaways from this election? What outcomes are you most excited about? Any disappointments? And what are your expectations in the state politics for the next year, given what we see in the overall results?
Yeah, so I think the statewide officers, none too surprising, because I think, right, just the numbers were sort of supporting Malia Cohen winning, and shout out to her being the first Black controller of the state of California. So no surprises there, but very, very happy, because a lot of these were sort of really big battles in the primary, especially I would say for Rob Bonta's race in Attorney General. So we're really happy with him being performing really well in the general election. So statewide officers, no surprises there. State legislature, I mean, I'm definitely one of the people who's hitting the refresh button on the results pages every few hours. And so there's a lot of races that are undecided. Right now, from where things sort of stand, it looks like things have gotten slightly more progressive in the state legislature, but for the most part, where we were losing some key progressive legislators like Richard Bloom, we're getting other progressive legislators voted in their place. And so I think that's great to really hold on to that. Another good example up here in the area, in my area, because I'm based in the Bay Area, is like Bob Wykowski's leaving, and hopefully Aisha Wahab will be taking his place as well. So really glad that progressives are holding pretty strong. I think a couple of the races I'm really excited about, and candidates, of course, Aisha Wahab, I just mentioned, Carolyn Menjivar, really big fan of hers and endorsed her really early on as well. Happy about Catherine Blakespeare, looking like she flipped her race as well. Of course, Lola, very excited about too. And folks like Liz Ortega. And so what I'm really excited about is it feels like there's a lot more progressives, and especially women of color, who have been organizers in labor, in community organizing, who are really going to be big champions for working families in Sacramento. So I'm really excited about those wins. And then I'm, sort of crossing my fingers with folks like Pilar Schiavo being able to, pull out that big flip as well. So there's a couple that we're still waiting, that are a couple that are kind of too close to call, but I'm hoping will flip. So like Pilar, I think Christy Holstage is another exciting one. But I think a couple other top lines that people are really celebrating too is, I mean, it's sad to have to celebrate this in California, but for the first time, we'll likely be reaching about 33% of women in the state legislature, which is a record for California. And then we'll have about 10% of our state legislature is also going to be LGBTQ plus as well. And so it's great that we're making that progress. But again, especially on the side of women only being 33%, that's also obviously something we'd like to move a little bit faster on getting past that quickly.
Great, thanks for that overview. And so now I want to dive into the ballot measures, specifically the statewide ballot measures, which I know you guys were working really hard on. So first, I'm going to share the screen here for a second, just so everyone is on the same page with the results for the ballot measures. We can see measure 1 passed, measure 26 and 27 failed, measure 28 passed, 29 and 30 failed, and 31 passed. And as I mentioned earlier in my overview, we endorsed yes on 30, but otherwise this lines up with the club's recommendations or endorsements, I should say. So let's dive in, starting and we'll go individually. So starting with Prop 1, which enshrined the right to reproductive freedom in the state constitution. We know the Dobbs decision of the Supreme Court played a big factor nationally in turnout and in lots of other races where this was on the ballot in swing states. How do you think that it played out here in California?
It played out really well. I was really happy to see that Prop 1 was polling really well in several polls, including our own congressional polls. And I think what's notable is that even in counties where maybe a Republican or corporate Democrat was elected, Prop 1 still passed. So this being a very defining issue, and one where it's more and more seemingly like universally accepted as the right position to take. So I was really happy about that particular proposition. Very happy to see how that goes. But what I'm hoping too is, I mean, oftentimes what happens is we don't want people to conflate legal protections with people actually getting the access they need to that. And so obviously wanting to continue to push the state legislature and leaders to keep pushing on access, especially in rural areas where women and other folks who need abortion services just have a really difficult time accessing them.
Absolutely. So then let's go down to the next two, the 26 and 27, the two gambling ballot measures. Both failed to pass. Both had unbelievable amount of money spent in favor of them. Why do you think that the voters saw through that and decided to vote no?
I don't think I've heard, well, I think it was just really obvious where the money was going. And I think I've heard the most exhaustion with Prop 27, people just seeing ads everywhere. And I think the fact that they were being very blatant about trying to make it seem like it was a homeless measure when it was really about gambling, I think was just, once that came out, I think that was pretty obvious. And people were very disgusted by that open deception. I do think it's really, this also speaks to some of the state races as well. This level of spending makes it really difficult for people to feel very motivated to vote. And I think what's difficult is it also adds to this discouragement, and this is related to Prop 30 of how our elections are tipped towards people with a lot of wealth who can run these sorts of ads and these sorts of campaigns. I'm glad that in our elections, obviously, it didn't work out that the more money people spent, obviously, that they were able to win. But I think just that sort of outpacing any other ballot measure spending in history is pretty remarkable, given that just in 2020, the Prop 22 was a record-breaking one. And this clearly outpaced that ballot measure.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So Prop 29, another interesting one, those concerning the regulations on kidney dialysis centers. The state party supported this measure, but our club opposed it. This is now the third time where we've had a kidney dialysis measure on the ballot and the third time that it failed to pass. What do you think accounts for this outcome? They keep on failing. They keep on putting them on. Do you think we should expect another measure about kidney dialysis in 2024? And when does it stop?
I don't know. I never would have expected this would come up on the ballot for a third time. I think this ballot measure probably speaks a little bit to the failure of a ballot measure not being representative of a coalition of groups or communities. And I think it's just really hard. And also, I mean, I think it says something that it keeps failing by a larger and larger margin each time. So I think voters are just being very fatigued. And I think several friends of mine were joking that, they were more or less seeing the same exact ads against Prop 29 that they've seen in the past. So again, like it sort of reinforces this notion of like, there's not a whole lot of freshness or a whole lot of life on a proposition like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so then the other one that didn't pass, Prop 30, mentioned it earlier, but it would have provided subsidy for electric vehicles, charging stations, wildfire prevention. The state party and our club both supported it. but
Mhm.
Governor Newsom was a very vocal opponent, and then the measure failed. So what do you
Yeah.
think happened with that one?
I mean, you already said it. I mean, it's Governor Newsom. It's pretty clear the polling before and after he started running his ads against Prop 30 that he was the deciding factor. And we saw that again in our own congressional polling, that it was going to be up to undecided voters. But we did see that there is more support for that proposition, especially among voters of color and younger voters. And so we'll have to see what turnout was like in our communities, in these communities, when that data comes out. But I think it's pretty easy to say that one was like, once Governor Newsom puts his finger on the scale of any sort of ballot measure or campaign, that's going to skew things pretty clearly.
Yeah, that one was interesting to me because I heard a lot of people say, well, it's all about Lyft, and Lyft is
Mhm.
trying to make money off of this. And it's just kind of I mean, different people will disagree, but it's like, well, yeah, they're the ones who are trying to build the fleet of electric vehicles. So of course they're going to profit. But I mean, that's the whole
Mhm.
point of this, is that we're trying to electrify that market.
Yeah. And I think it was hard because usually we are really big advocates of telling people to follow the money and figure out where the influence and power extends from that. And this was a case where it was easy to say that this was a Lyft measure, but the actual details of it, obviously there was no specific carve out for Lyft. And like I said, the benefit to the communities way beyond Lyft was tremendous. And so it was really disappointing that this failed. And we worked really closely with California environmental voters, who was one of the leads on Prop 30. And I think what's really disappointing is, people want to point that Lyft funded this, but the reality is it's really expensive to run statewide ballot measures, which means movement people, folks on the ground, grassroots organizations are pretty much blocked out of that process unless they can get funding from, unfortunately, wealthy interests that, like Lyft was obviously on the opposite side of where we wanted them on Prop 22, but it's really hard to run these sorts of ballot measures as a social justice or movement or environmental organization. And so that's just a very real challenge of things here in California.
Got it. Okay, so finally, let's look at the sort of the local races. We talked about the statewide around Los Angeles County, a lot of interesting results. You mentioned the sheriffs that you've been tracking, so I'm sure you're excited to see Sheriff Villanueva lost.
Yes.
What are some of the most interesting results? What is the most promising? What are the most surprising from here in LA County?
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of it. So because I live in the Bay Area, I always find it very interesting to sort of see where things are going between the Bay Area and sort of LA area. You guys are definitely giving me a lot of envy because your voting results give me a lot more hope than what I'm seeing here, where things are definitely a lot more moderate or middle of the road here in the Bay Area. But I would say, I mean, just a couple of the races that folks have already lifted up, I would say, obviously, Karen Bass is really huge. Lindsay Horvath, you mentioned also, we're very excited about that race as well. A couple of the LA City Council members, again, like being younger folks, people of color, people who come from labor and organizing is really exciting. And I think that sort of, as you mentioned, sort of the pair between Villanueva losing and Measure A passing, I think it's great that LA voters are really sort of seeing the reality, the picture for what it is. But I'm reserving sort of judgment on where Sheriff-elect Luna is going to go. I think he now knows he has more eyes on him, and so he won't be able to hopefully get away with what Villanueva did. But it's always a challenge in sheriff races when people have to come from law enforcement, and generally people who come from law enforcement aren't necessarily going to be the right and best leaders to bring on reforms. But we'll see. I'm still hopeful because Villanueva was obviously horrible, so that was a big win. So I'm actually very hopeful about LA, and of course the state legislative races. Yeah, just some really, really great progressive candidates that I think a lot of folks are really excited about.
I totally agree with the sheriff. It's complicated because it's like the last time around you had a Trump supporting Republican versus Villanueva. So was that the right decision? And given what happened, and it's so difficult. And a lot of people have even been saying with regard to Measure A, maybe it would be even better to go a step further and say this should not be an elected position, but it should be something that is hired. We hire a police chief, our council, our city manager, I should say, hires the police chief. And so maybe that's something that the Board of Supervisors should be doing. But,
Yeah, and one other thing I want to mention too, because even though it wasn't on the general election ballot, one of the races that we were bracing for and a lot of partners were watching was, of course, like the second or third effort to try to recall Gascon. So we're also very happy that that never made it to the ballot, because yeah, I mean, I feel confident that if it would have made it to the ballot, it would have failed, but it's just nice to not have needed to mount another campaign against that recall.
Absolutely, especially after the one against Newsom. I mean, this club has taken a position, we're against all the recalls. You give us a recall, we'd say, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So that's one reason we supported Measure A so strongly, because we don't think that it should be up to the whim of a small group of activists who are trying to make a political statement. But if you give it to that power to 5 elected officials and say, this has to be for cause if we're going to get rid of someone who the people put into office.
Yeah. And my hope, I think too, it looks like we're on track to elect a lot of good people. And my hope is with a lot of these good people we've elected into office that they really are committed to true co-governance with communities. Because obviously, I think a lot of folks can argue the reason why folks like in LA, like the city council members, the sheriff went off track was because they lost touch with their communities or the whole of their communities. And so hopefully these folks worked really hard on staying in touch. Like I think Assemblymember Bloom was joking that Rick Chavez-Zabur, who we also endorsed and I just spoke with today, continue to stay in touch and have conversations about bill priorities, what kind of votes to take, and that, because I think that's arguably what's going to make things really successful for us.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Irene. Really appreciate
Thank you for having me.
The work that you're doing with the Courage campaign is really helpful for the voter guide for everybody to figure out some of these more complicated, nuanced races. So thanks so much for your analysis. We appreciate it.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
You too. And we were just speaking about him. So now we're going to hear from a whole bunch of people who won their election tonight in a few moments after we have a couple more speakers. But we wanted to welcome one of them right now, our new Assembly member, Rick Chavez-Zabur. Rick, congratulations on your win. And we're excited to have you in the Assembly representing Santa Monica.
Well, thank you, John, and thanks everyone for all of your strong support. We don't have all the numbers in, but I actually think that Santa Monica was my strongest. Santa Monica and West Hollywood were clearly my strongest areas, which I was very proud that I had, that won most heavily in the most progressive parts of the district. As you can see, I'm in the Residence Inn in Sacramento. I just went through my second day of orientation with an incredibly impressive class of new members of the Assembly. I've already hired my chief of staff, who will be Bob Hartnagel, who was Mark Leno's chief of staff for over 14 years. So I'm really privileged that he decided to leave the heading up the government affairs for the University of California system and come back to the Capitol to work for me. We are filling out my staff now. I'll be in Sacramento again tomorrow, doing interviews for all my key spots on the staff, and we'll be letting you all know who I'll be hiring and who you'll be interfacing with. For those of you who worked with Alex Melbreck on my campaign, he's actually going to be moving to Sacramento and will be my scheduler. So one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that we brought Alex along. I mean, you all know how incredibly talented and dedicated he is, but it was important to me that my scheduler understands the community and the people in the community, and I think Alex has learned that over the course of the campaign. I'm already working on 2 bills. I'm not going to tell you what they are yet, but we're going to be introducing bills on the day that I'm sworn in. The general areas will be on climate change and LGBTQ rights, because those are sort of defining areas for me, and just thought that symbolically we want to do a bill on each of those on my first day as I come in. Very, very excited about just sort of the opportunity that we have. I mean, I'm, really cognizant of the fact that I've got a very short amount of time in the legislature. It's a privilege to represent the people in the 51st district and represent and be a progressive voice in Southern California. And I know, for me, this is not about just coming to Sacramento. I mean, I want to achieve change, and I've got a limited amount of time to do that. I was, talking to Senator Scott Wiener, who many of you know, and I think I have the same perspective. It's, to this time, the clock runs very quickly. We have a responsibility, those of us who were elected to these positions, to do everything we can to really improve the lives of people in California and our most vulnerable. And I take that really seriously. And so I just want to, we will be forming, as soon as we have my district staff in place, a number of advisory committees, and we'll be letting you all know. Would love to have representatives from the club on those. One will be on environmental protection and climate change, and then another will be on housing and homelessness, and we may be forming some others. I do intend to be a member of the assembly who is back in the district and active and engaged with you all. Please, let me know when you want me to, to come before the club. Would love to give you more of a sense of what my bill package is like. Would be very grateful for any other input that you all have on areas that I should be focusing on. And I just really want to, stop there and say that I'm just very, very grateful for the endorsement and the support of this club. Want to congratulate the other endorsed candidates of the club. It became very clear to me how important this club is. You all were incredibly successful in achieving, helping elect progressives across the ballot, up and down the ballot. And I don't think that it was an accident that I won Santa Monica so heavily. I think it was a lot to do with both the club and SMER's engagement and the amount of grassroots work that you were doing in the community supporting your candidate. So I really thank you from the bottom of my heart for the support. I'll always remember that. And obviously am very, very dedicated to living up to the really high expectations I think you have of all of those that you endorse. So thank you so much. I'm happy to stick around and answer questions if that's appropriate, or let you get to some of the other candidates that I know are waiting to address the club, John.
Well, thanks, Rick. And I think we can let the cat out of the bag a little bit, but you and I have been talking, and we're going to set up a full meeting for that kind of opportunity within the first couple months of next year. So let's keep everybody who's listening now, write down your questions for Rick, and we're going to open it up and have a real open town hall opportunity at the beginning of next year. So thanks so much for stopping by. Again, congratulations. And we're really looking forward to our partnership, working with you to achieve progressive action in Sacramento.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you, everyone. Really, really grateful. Take care.
Thanks, Rick. So we've got a couple more speakers. And again, in a little bit, we're going to get back to our other winning candidates up and down the ballot. So first, we're going to go to Danielle Wilson from Unite Here. Danielle, thanks for joining us.
Hi, so happy to be here with everyone. What an honor.
Great to see you.
Me
So
too.
many of us in Santa Monica know Unite Here from all the great advocacy work you do in support of our hospitality workers at the hotels in Santa Monica and around our region. But can you elaborate a little bit on how the union's been involved with elections in the LA area this cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to sort of broaden that out a little bit too, John, for people who aren't familiar with Unite Here across the country. As a union, we knocked on 2.7 million doors in the 4 key swing states in this election. That's Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania. That's Unite Here International. And at Unite Here Local 11, across the region, across LA County, we knocked on 770,000 doors. And that is hotel workers, that is people who work at the airport, dishwashers, servers, our rank and file membership. And I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of where that program comes from, why our members are so motivated to do the key work that we think needs to be done in elections to win them, which is to knock on doors, to talk to voters face to face. And that is because our membership are some of the lowest paid service workers in the industry, right? These are people who, like many of us, grew up in families where people are working 2 and 3 jobs to put food on the table. These are not people who can really be political agents in their own lives, because they're just trying to figure out how to get food on the table that night. And when someone joins a union, that changes. That the material circumstances of their life change. They have a livable wage. They have full family health insurance. They have a pension. That's unspeakable for someone in my generation, right? But what that does is it enables the very people who are impacted by day-to-day decisions of our policymakers, deciding what wages are, deciding who gets to live where, that enables them to be active and to participate in those decisions. And I want to highlight someone who's on this meeting, Christina Navarro, who is a member of this club, who's one of our members, who is an example, shining example of what I'm talking about and sort of how we can scale this up, right? Which is what we want to do with this club. And I appreciate you giving us time to do this. But Christina has worked at the Beverly Hilton for 18 years as a housekeeper. She's lived in Santa Monica for the last 6 years. She's on the steering committee of Santa Monicans for Renters' Rights. And she has knocked on doors in Arizona for multiple cycles in the city of Santa Monica. In this cycle, Christina recruited her neighbor, Dolores, a lovely, lovely woman in her 80s who's lived in her rent-controlled apartment for 40 years, and then would go and knock on doors in Santa Monica. And if you ask Christina why she did that, she will tell you that she had to sit through hours of council meetings listening to the city council debate the merits of rent control in the city of Santa Monica. And in our union, we understand the importance of rent control, right? That is the difference between having to travel 2 and 3 hours to and from your workplace. That is the difference between being able to send your kids to the best public schools in the country. I don't care what anyone says, Santa Monica schools are the best public schools in the country. And so what I'm saying is there's real material differences in who represents us in office, and our members understand that intimately, whether it's, school board, city council, all the way up to Senate. If you looked at the Nevada Senate results on Saturday, Catherine Cortez Masto was up at 800 votes. That was our union that knocked on hundreds of doors to get people to cure their ballots, right? That is the difference that we've been able to make on a national scale.
Cool. We really appreciate all the work that Unite Here has been doing. And thank you so much for, especially in those swing states, we saw great results. And Georgia is still going. So good luck with the runoff in a few weeks there. We'll be on the phones. We'll be manning the phones from Santa Monica. So setting aside Santa Monica for a moment, looking at the rest of the LA County region, what are some of the key races that Unite Here was actively involved with? What are some of the highlights or lowlights of the outcome from Unite Here's perspective?
So we had comprehensive field programs in Santa Monica City Council District, LA City Council District 13, LA Council District 11, and the overlapping districts, seats, supervisor, mayor. And the difference that you see in these races is places where we were successfully able to elevate the issues of workers. That's really where we won, right? And workers and renters, that is the formula. And I draw out CD11, Council District 11, which is the neighboring LA Council District, as somewhat of a foil to Santa Monica to just sort of show what that looks like, right? Where we are able to make the issues of rent, the issues of wages, the issues of good jobs, campaign issues, that is where we were able to pull people over the top. And just to one more national sort of shout out here. In Pennsylvania, we did not talk to voters about candidates. That was not the first word out of our mouths. The first words out of our mouths when we're canvassing some of the most impoverished precincts in the city of Philadelphia was, how can we help you? Do you need a job, right? we have a training center where we can help you get a union job. Is that what your family needs, right? That's really the kind of deep organizing that we do. And so in Council District 13, we had been canvassing mostly Latino voters since October, right? Like we have been, you know, deep in these districts, building relationships with voters. And so I'm very proud to report that our own organizer, Hugo Soto Martinez, has been successful in LA Council District 13, which is incredible. Lindsay's victory is an upset. I mean, this is a big deal, Lindsay being ahead by this much. And in Santa Monica, Carolyn, Jesse, Natalia, and Ellis were not just, you know, candidates to block other candidates with, like in some of the races. These are some of the best people, most pro rent control, most pro worker candidates in the region, in my opinion. You guys are awesome. And so we were able to go to doors and really tell them, this is the renter slate, right? These are the people who will stand up for you and fight for you. And so, you know, I'm very, very proud of what we're able to do here as well. And then I'll say in West Hollywood, it's a nail biter, but it looks like we have been able to Chelsea Byers, who's again, you know, right up there with all these progressive candidates in Santa Monica. She is 20, no, now that was yesterday. She was 26 votes ahead. She's pulled ahead a little bit more. And then another one of our endorsed candidates, Zakia Wright, who's a labor lawyer by trade, is just behind Chelsea. So that could be a real big deal, real big game changer there as well.
That's great. Your home, your city, West
My
Hollywood.
turf.
Right. So let's go back to what you were talking about with Santa Monica, your involvement here. So elephant in the room, I guess, but Unite Here and SMER backed two of the same council candidates as the Democratic Club. Carolyn Terosas and Jesse Zwick both won their election by a wide margin. The third spot, Unite Here and SMER, that's Santa Monicans for Renters' Rights, backed Ellis Raskin, while the Democratic Club backed Natalia Zernitskaya. And we're looking at the results. It seems like, you know, we're not ready to make any final predictions yet, but it seems likely that Lana Negrete, the appointed incumbent, is likely to win and serve for a full term rather than either Natalia or Ellis being able to come back and win there. So, and that's an outcome that all three of the groups outspokenly opposed in this election. So can you discuss why do you think we had that split and what the outcome might mean for Santa Monica looking forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think I need to really say that it's obvious that if all the progressive groups aligned around a third candidate, we would have won the third seat. But I do think it's important for folks in this club to think about this from a regional perspective. Santa Monica is a democracy. It's true. Compared to other cities, Santa Monica is not a company town, right? It's not one progressive group against the Chamber of Commerce. This is a city where you have real organization that has been building over the last 4 decades, right? So you're gonna have groups that have differences and opinions. And I think that's okay. That is a good thing. That means that there's actual negotiation and discussion and debate and organizing that happens between the top, you know, these progressive groups that have been building for a long time. It is a big deal that I can pretty much say with confidence that every progressive group in the city believes in rent control. Every progressive group believes workers should be in a union. Every progressive group believes in service and housing-based solutions to homelessness. You can't say that for other parts of this region, and I mean it. And that is the result of the hard work of people in this room, like way before me, obviously. All the people in this room who have worked so hard for that, to have values that are represented across many, many groups. And so we all know that it's 95% and then the little percent of disagreement at the end. You know, and I talked to Natalia yesterday. I said, we'd go to the doors, people would be like, well, I'm with Natalia. We'd be like, great, let's fill out your ballot right now, right? Like there was no actual policy disagreements in the end. And as for sort of what this will mean, I mean, you look at the numbers, right? I mean, we brought Lana way down, right? No one can argue that. And I think that we all of the you know, activists in the city created an obvious choice. There's an obvious choice, I think, in the city. And I think there's real accountability, and we're just going to have to really back up our progressives on the council, protect them, back them up.
Great. So what do you think are the big lessons from this election, either in Santa Monica, across the region, across the country, that Unite Here will take away and use in future election cycles?
A couple of things. One, John, I appreciated your remarks at the beginning about sort of the nature of how elections have gotten, specifically in Santa Monica. So I want to say there were 3 incidents of physical violence against our canvassers in the city of Santa Monica. I don't know what to say about the fact that that happened here and nowhere else where we were canvassing. Completely, unprovoked attacks. The vitriol, the personal vitriol that a lot of people experience. I think it's something that we really need to talk about. We can't normalize this kind of behavior. It really held us back a lot. That kind of stuff results in not talking to voters. That's what that means. And the stakes are just too high across the region. So I want to continue talking about that as a community. And I just think, oftentimes, in my own city in West Hollywood, we have to deal with the rhetoric of unions being outsiders or third parties, et cetera. And I think the more we center our membership, people like Christina, people like Dolores, people, who come from the rank and file and are real leaders in the community, and the issues that impact them, in a country like ours and in a region where the majority rules, the majority is working people. And that's just the fact. And we win on the minimum wage every time. We win on rent control every time. And I think we just got to keep elevating those issues every election cycle.
Excellent. Well, thanks for your insight. Thank you again for all the work that you've done. I mean, it's great to hear about all the work you've been doing around the country. And a lot of us know about the work that you're doing here in Santa Monica, but in the region in general, congratulations on the wins. We're excited about Ugo and a lot of the other winners that you were working with. So thanks again, Danielle. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, John. And I dropped a link in the chat for folks who want to support all the people who just left Arizona and just landed in Georgia over the weekend to win that race there. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so now we're going to go to our next guest, our former mayor, Ted Winterer. Ted, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. How's Avery doing?
He's doing good. He's in bed. He's now sleeping through the night, which is really exciting.
Oh, hallelujah.
10 hours at a time. Really, really great.
Good. So I jotted down a few thoughts on my phone. I don't know if any of them are terribly original or be a surprise to anybody in this room, but let's reflect back on where we were in the city in 2020 when, we threw some of the bums out of office, myself included. And there was a question at that time, which sort of persisted over the last 2 years, about whether or not that 2020 election represented a sea change in Santa Monica politics, or whether it was a one-off for a variety of factors, COVID, general hostility to being locked up, the events of May 31st, all sorts of different things. And a lot of rhetoric I heard before this election was that SMER doesn't matter anymore, the Dem Club doesn't matter anymore, Forward doesn't matter anymore. That, and people are being courted by the change slate saying we're the ones that have the influence over the electorate now. And clearly all that proved to be egregiously wrong. There were some differences between, for instance, SMER and the Dem Club and their endorsements, primarily just, one difference in the council, and then the Dem Club endorsed 4 people at the school board and SMER endorsed 3. But on the whole, the progressive organizations between the 3 of them did extremely well. So I think that bodes well for the future. We had a turnout of young progressive voters. I think the biggest thing that I noticed, and Danielle touched on this, is that lots of us in 2020 chose not to canvass out of deference to the COVID restrictions, right? We've basically felt nobody wanted to have some stranger knock on their door and breathe in their face. The Change Slate people did not make that decision, and they did go out and canvass. And I still believe, despite all the focuses are in our elections on digital ads and social media ads and texting, et cetera, all the newer technology, canvassing really makes a huge difference, particularly in a community the size of Santa Monica. I was out there with the Dem Club canvassing, and it's, you talk to people and they're just grateful to talk to someone else who actually has a clue what's going on in local politics, because they're getting deluged with information from all sorts of different parties, and they're trying to parse through it all. And if they talk to someone who's reasonable and calm and who's their neighbor, explains, and this is the lay of the land. This is why I'm voting this way. They're really appreciative of that interactions. I really think that's a lesson to be needs to be carried forward in subsequent years, as we need to continue to get those foot soldiers out there, knock on people's doors, have conversations with people. I also think, you know, it's talked about a lot in the national election. One of the differences here, frankly, is quote unquote candidate quality. We on the progressive side ran some really good candidates, right? I mean, to the point that, yeah, some of them weren't able to get elected because there were too many of them. And that's something we'll be talking about, I'm sure, but candidate equality was a big issue. I also think that the voters, they repudiated that dystopian view of Santa Monica, right? That's been circulated by the chain slate, that the wheels are coming off left and right, and the city's going to hell in a handcart. Most people enjoy living in the city. They're sanguine about its future. Yes, there are challenges, but they want an optimistic view of their city. They don't want a negative view. And I think that was an important thing for me in this election. I think that the police union probably is doing some serious soul searching because they spent a lot of money on their candidates and succeeded in only getting one elected, where I think they really felt that they were going to do much better than they did. I think that also it's a repudiation to the big real estate money that backed the change slate. I mean, I think most of you know that, you know, all these complaints that get levied against Santa Monica Ford being, you know, funded only by developers. They didn't get any money from developers. The developer money went to the change slate. The real estate money went to the change slate. The big corporate landlords, all that money went to the change slate. And they have to be thinking, why did we spend all that money? We didn't really get what we wanted out of this election. They also, of course, spent a lot of money voting, encouraging people to vote no on GS, right? And it appears, unless something changes dramatically, and I don't expect it to, the GS is going to pass, which I think is extraordinarily significant for the city. I've been looking at the homeless issue for years, and I think that one of the things that people really need to acknowledge that GS does is not only provide money, obviously, for the schools and for more affordable housing, but to keep people housed, right? We have to realize if the county of Los Angeles in any given period of time houses 20,000 homeless individuals, but 21,000 people become unhoused, you're not winning that. You're not winning that challenge. So you have to work on keeping the people who are potentially unhoused housing. You need those rental subsidies. I'm hopeful that this nation and this state, I happened to be on a panel in Seoul, Korea years ago with, of all places, with Michael Tubbs, the former mayor of Stockton, where he had just introduced the concept of universal basic income. And that seemed really strange to a lot of people. But I think we've seen in recent years with the increase in the child tax credit that was in place for a while during COVID, and we've seen with some of the rental subsidies we've had in place, that those are very powerful tools to keep people off the streets. That we live in a society that's so deeply divided by income inequality that if you're really concerned about homelessness, you need to pony up and keep those people of lesser means housed. I think that's a very important lesson from this election. The other thing I've noticed is statewide, and it goes hand in hand with GS passing here, across the state, all sorts of housing measures passed. And it boosted the candidates who are in favor of those housing measures. I think it bodes well for a repeal of Article 34 of the state constitution in 2 years. Hopefully that'll be on the ballot for people to know about that. It's a vestige of our racist past in the state, where you actually in communities have to regularly have a vote to fund public housing, to say that the voters, that the city councils can use taxpayer funds to build affordable housing, which is just ridiculous. I mean, it's about absurd as the debt ceiling in Congress, right? I mean, it's just, let's do away with both of those things. So I was really encouraged by the results all around. Obviously, we would have liked to have a couple of different results locally, but I think it's been, again, we've heard this over and over again. We didn't see a red wave, it was a red mirage. And we're seeing the same sort of thing on the ground here. The voters of Santa Monica are reverting back to the voters that we knew for decades. And I think we can probably successfully say that whatever happened in 2020 was a one-off. And that, as Richard Bloom was saying, we look forward to having a continued progressive wave in the city in years to come.
Great. Well, thanks for that overview, Ted. You hit a lot of the questions I was going to ask you, so we'll come back to some points, but we knocked out some of them right away. That's great. Very efficient for the members who are ready to wrap up. So I want to ask you, because you had a very poignant op-ed in the Daily Press right before the election, comparing some of the tactics of some of our opponents to those that are used by Donald Trump and his supporters. So can you summarize some of what you've observed that led you to write this? And do you think those tactics ended up being effective for them?
Well, as I said, I mean, I think that, you know, I talked about that dystopian perspective, right? And Donald Trump basically got elected because he said the United States is falling into total disrepair and only I can save it. And we had a lot of that rhetoric back in 2020 in our local elections. So that was the first analogy I saw, is this idea is you create this perspective of what's going on, that it needs to be solved, that things are terrible, you need to address it. The other thing you do is you focus on an aggrieved class, right? In Trump's case, it tended to be a lot of people in this country, the economy's left them behind, they're insecure about their future, and they feel that nobody, and rightfully so, and I think a lot of places. I think we saw in 2016 that Hillary Clinton made a mistake not probably engaging some of those people in the Rust Belt states, for instance, and listening to their concerns about their economic futures. And here in Santa Monica, you created, you know, it totally just dismays me. And I said that in my piece, that we used to always in the city talk about community. You know, we're a community, it's not just the people who live here, it's the businesses, it's the visitors, the workers, et cetera. Now, all of a sudden, a lot of the rhetoric on one side is all about the residents, as if they are this monolithic block who think exactly the same. And I can tell you, I've been on the city council for years, and I'm sure Kevin and Sue and other people who are in this call can tell you, there's a great disparity of opinions in this town. Very vocal, but very, very different. For every one person who would say, okay, downtown Santa Monica, you shouldn't build over 2 stories, or someone says, no, we should be going up to 12. That's just one example. So you create this aggrieved class, and then by using the tools of social media, without any assistance from the Russian or the Chinese, but you just sort of create this false narrative about what's going on, that the people in power are corrupt and they don't listen to you. That little buzzword about you don't listen to us, that basically means, well, you did something I don't agree with, so you're not listening to me. What they don't understand is people in the council listen to you, they just might have a different opinion. That's what goes on in this country. We have a diversity of opinions. So you do that, and then, you know, I see some questionable behavior going on. I've been dismayed, for instance, when Gleam put forward that motion to investigate Brown Act violations, that didn't go forward. To me, it was always important on the council just to be as ethical and straightforward and honest as possible. So I find that troubling. So there's a lot of analogies between that Trump playbook that I think went on in this city. I got some blowback for it. Most confusing me, the blowback was some guy saying, oh, well, you know so much about Trump tactics, you must be a Trump supporter. It's like, no, I just actually sort of pay attention to what's going on around me. But I think we've seen a lot of that. It's a populist playbook. It's not uncommon. It's the same thing you see, you know, it's what Mussolini did in Italy in the late 30s, 1940s. I mean, it's standard populist playback. There's this, it's us versus them. And so we need to put up the walls, shut the doors, and take care of ourselves and be angry.
So I wanted to ask you mentioned that the developer money went to the candidates who are seen as the anti-growth candidates. There's usually, we see in the past the other way, where they tend to support the more pro-growth candidates, so to speak. Why do you think they switched this cycle? Obviously, it didn't work out, as you said, but what do you think caused them to go that way?
Well, I think it depends. I think, you know, obviously, if a company like Douglas Elliman is putting money behind those candidates, they're probably thinking, okay, we can eviscerate rent control in Santa Monica, and that would be great for us. I mean, they all go for different agendas. The developer money, to me, is frankly baffling, because really, any of us who are paying attention know this. As far as housing development goes in the city, we've lost all local control already. The really bizarre thing is the money that came from Leo Pistilnikov, who's a big developer and has one of those builder's remedy projects of, you know, 2,000 units and 800,000 square feet of office space and a big hotel down in Redondo Beach, and has one of the builder's remedy projects here. Why he's giving money to the Santa Monicans for change, I don't know. There must be something going on behind closed doors, some promises made. I don't quite get it, but I don't see what they really get out of it. If the council really can't have any authority whatsoever to approve or disapprove housing projects that are all by right under state law, I don't really quite get that. Other than that, the general thesis, again, there were all those people thought, okay, Santa Monica's changed. We're no longer going to have a city council that cares about workers' rights, cares about the environment, cares about rent control, cares about all these different progressive issues. They're the ones in power, so we just want to be nice to them, right? I mean, you see that all the time in national politics, where big money donors, they give money to both sides, right? They give money to the Dems and the Republicans. Because whoever wins, they want to be able to knock on the door and say, hey, we helped you get in office, now help us. But I think they just made that bet that the change slate was going to do really, really well, and they bet wrong, and they probably ruined the day that they made those donations.
Right. So let's go to the school board results now. You're one of the co-chairs of SEPS, or the Community for Excellence in Public Schools. And all three of the candidates that you endorsed won their election, plus Stacy Rouse, who was endorsed by this club. So personally, I actually expected that this race was going to be closer than it ended up being. I thought we might even see a split result, but it ended up being a pretty decisive victory for the four candidates that we just mentioned. So why do you think accounted for that wide margin?
I think it's a number of things. I think by and large, most parents, I've still got a kid in the school district. I've got one that's off in college now. I got one that was at Sam High now, and most of the parents I talk to are pretty darn happy with the education their kids are getting, right? And particularly, I think they're locally happy, right? I mean, they might hear that there's complaints about what the school board is doing citywide, but when they look at their elementary school or their middle school, they're going, well, it's all working there for the best, most part. Maybe there's still some challenges with the achievement gap and other things that this district needs to address. And I also think that people are sort of tired of the rancor about the school board, that they're happy with their schools and they don't quite understand these complaints. And so they went for the positive message that came out of the two incumbents and Alicia. I'm of all the candidates, I'm glad that Stacy, someone from Malibu, got elected to the school board. We couldn't endorse her at SEPS just because she was on a slate running against our candidates, and it just seemed, antithetical to our goals. But I think it's good we have someone from Malibu as we work through this possible separation, and that part of the district should continue to have a voice on the school board. But I think that's what happened. I think it was a matter, once again, of people getting tired of that dystopian view of either the city or the school board and thinking, actually, if I stop and look around, things are pretty good.
So let's look at some of the ballot measures locally this cycle. Ended up most of them winning by big margins. I know there was some concern by some council members that there could be a ballot measure fatigue or a tax fatigue based on those, but with the exception of Phil Brock's measure DT, which lost in a 2-1 blowout, most of the other ones all are doing pretty well. What I was interested about that one, and of course, full disclosure, I was one of the proponents for Measure GS, and you talked about the virtue of Measure GS and why you think that it's going to be beneficial to the city. But I definitely, from a political strategic perspective, was concerned, as I spoke about at city council meetings, that because there were two competing ballot measures, DT and GS, that there definitely was a risk that neither would pass, or potentially Phil Brock's measure DT would pass instead of GS because it was a lower tax rate. So why do you think it ended up being that voters rejected Phil Brock's measure overwhelmingly, and GS looks like it's heading towards a passage?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I have yet to look at the final numbers, but I think there was a huge amount of money spent vote no on both DT and GS, right? So you had that negative campaign against both. I think that probably a whole lot more money in total was spent in favor of GS rather than it was spent in favor of DT, although I've not seen the final numbers. But I also think it's what I talked to earlier, is about that change not only in the city, but across the state, that people really recognizing that we need to have housing that's affordable to everybody, right? And that you can't sit around and complain about homelessness and not try to do something to get those people housed. And so I think that's what it is. I don't think the DT promised to do enough about housing it. I think that for the average individual, yeah, sure, DT would fund housing, crossing guards, for instance, right? But the city should be able to fund crossing guards. That's not a huge line item in the budget, right? So why should we have a new tax for that? Well, we have a new tax for GS because we know we do need to have money for publicly funded affordable housing, right? That makes more sense to astute progressive voters in this town. So I think frankly, I was shocked how poorly DT did. But that's my armchair analysis, at least at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know I agree with you that housing is something that I think we need to really earmark money towards being able to create this specific kind of homelessness prevention and deed restricted affordable housing, and that this measure does. And not to speak for the other two proponents who I know are both on the call, but it's a very important issue for all of us.
Yeah, I think most people in the city like living in a diverse community, a socioeconomically diverse community. And we've lost a lot of that. And they recognize that creating housing for different income levels will bring back what we've lost in the past and hold on to what we have now. I mean, again, I think that's one of the virtues of the Santa Monica public school system is your kids can go there and, nobody wears uniforms. Everybody wears, I can tell you with the kids Samo High, if you don't have a hole in your t-shirt, you're dressed very well. Nobody can look at each other and make those judgments about class or anything like that. And it's just great to see the kids in such a diverse community as there is in Santa Monica High School. And they learn those lessons to get along with people who look different or sound different or have different faiths or whatever. And I think that people in Santa Monica cherish that diversity. And so they realize that to keep that and enhance it, we need to have that housing for all income levels.
So the last one I want to ask you about is Measure SMC, which seems on track for passage. It's still close. It needs to get 55%. And the last time I checked today, which, I'm also one of the people constantly refreshing the site, but it's just above 56%. So the result isn't necessarily close, 56 to 44, but the threshold, it's still close to the threshold for passage. I know typically the school and college bonds, I think, passed by a wider margin than that. Why do you think this one was closer? Why do you think it came down to the wire?
I think that there was a rebellion up in Malibu. I think that the numbers show that maybe 35% to 40% approval up in Malibu, where historically you get a higher number for bond measures out of Malibu, so you don't have to get as many votes out of Santa Monica. I think that was the big difference. And, the Malibu City Council came out opposing it, right? So a lot of people in Malibu thought, well, our city council's opposing Measure SMC, we should not vote for it, and there's always, the spillover of the tensions between Malibu and Santa Monica and the school district are probably impacting some of the way people vote for a college bond measure, for better or worse. It's sort of lumping it all together into education and complaints that all the money is going to Santa Monica. Why should we pay for it? Even though you actually look at the data, there's plenty of new facilities have been built by both agencies up in Malibu to the benefit of those residents. So I just think it was a Malibu rebellion that kept those numbers from getting higher than they could have been in the past.
Got it. Well, thanks so much for your insight. I think that's the end of my questions, but we really appreciate you coming by and to talk about
Sure.
the Monica results.
Happy to do it. Good to see everyone.
Great. Thanks, Ted. So now, before we wrap up here, we're going to go around the room and hear from some of our winning candidates, the candidates who we endorsed, who won. And we'll start at the top level with one of our statewide electeds who's here this evening. So Tony Vasquez, congratulations on your win.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah, I'm out here in Sacramento at the Sheraton. Now I'm actually in the room. For some reason, the camera's not coming up. But hopefully you can hear me clearly. First of all, thank you, like I mentioned earlier, to the club and a lot of the supporters that you've always been very supportive since I ran back in 1990. And having been involved in electoral politics in Santa Monica since 1975, we've gone through some huge changes, even though this turnout, I don't think was as good as I wanted it to be. And surprisingly, the turnout, even for a gubernatorial, I think was historically low, especially since Smur's been in town. I know back in 1975, the turnouts weren't that big because really back then the chamber was pretty much running the city. So the turnouts were very low. But since Smur came into town in 79, the turnouts have always been relatively high. And then especially when we moved them, because I don't know if people remember, our elections used to be in off years and we'd be voting in April. But since we moved it, when Smur came in power with the Dem Club actually to November, that made a huge change in the turnouts. But for some reason, this one, didn't seem to be as high as it usually is. And of course, I guess some people are saying that the weather could have played a role, but really we had a lot of early voting that took place, which hasn't happened in the past. So I was still expecting a lot higher turnout for this election. But overall, when you look at, the quality of candidates that got elected, I think we did pretty well. Everything from the school board all the way up to our senators and our assembly person.
Well, we're glad that they supported you too. I mean, we're glad to have you on the Board of Equalization.
No, thank you. And I'm looking forward, especially now with Rick. I think I heard him earlier, and he's actually up here in Sacramento. I'm going to touch base with them while I'm here to talk about some of the things I think we can do jointly, especially with tax credits. As we're looking at this measure, which looks like GS is going to go forward, I think there's going to be some good opportunities to develop some good partnerships, hopefully to generate more housing in the city. Affordable housing, I should say.
That's great. Well, thanks, Tony, and good luck on your next term.
Thank you. Thank you all. And thanks for all the support I've gotten from the club.
Yeah, well, of course, we're glad to support. Always love to support Santa Monicans going up to the next level of office.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to hear from one of our winning city council candidates. Came in first place this year, Carolyn Tarosis.
Thank you so much, John. And it's so great to see everyone. And all I can really say is just thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. From Danielle and the hard work that she personally did and Unite Here did, to John and Dan and Danny, organizing canvas after canvas after canvas, both here and for our candidates across the region. I 100% know that we would not have been able to do it without you. I think everyone doubted the progressive majority, and we proved we're still here. We're still a force to be reckoned with, and we want to make this a city that welcomes everyone, lifts everyone up, ensures that workers get paid a fair wage, and that our renters and seniors and families are protected. And that's what we are about, and that's what we are going to do. I'm really excited to bring decorum and civility and professionalism back to City Hall. I'm excited to be able to work hopefully with Gleam and Jesse, who I believe are on here. And of course, make sure that we're able to bring everyone in together, because you need 4 votes to get something passed, right? So we all have to work on being kind and civil and respectful to each other here. I think there was a lot said during the election that was disrespectful. Let's all come together. I think that what unites us is much greater than what is dividing us, kind of like to what Danielle mentioned with the different groups around town. We all believe in the same things fundamentally here, and let's work together, and let's also think about 2024. Just for everyone to know, I will send something out to the email list, but our community swearing in is December 6th, and it's at City Hall, and I would, of course, invite everyone here to come. And I think we can send stuff out about that. And then I would just have to say that I'm really proud of measures RC and EM that both passed. More than a dozen form of local taxes and housing support, homeless support measures were on the ballot across California this election. And I'm really proud that we were leading the way and that we're showing what it means to protect our renters. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for all of your help.
Thanks, Carolyn. Looking forward to being at that swearing-in ceremony. And another person who will be there is your new future colleague, Jesse Zwick. Jesse, congratulations.
Thank you, John, and thank you, everyone. I am honored and excited, and frankly, maybe just a little bit surprised to be in this position to get to represent you all on City Council. I'm happy to be a first-time council member alongside Carolyn Tarosis, who I'm now also happy to call a friend, and we'll be going through that together. I'm sad to not be joined by either Natalia or Ellis, most likely. But I do believe that between all of us as candidates, and also Lindsay Horvath and others, I'm really excited to be a part of what I see as a new core of young, exciting millennial candidates who are lifting a banner of progressivism for a new generation, especially on the West Side here. And I will be approaching this job with the humility of someone who has a lot to learn, and I hope to learn and lean on many of you in that process. And I'm really thankful to all of you in this club for your engagement and your canvassing, and especially, as Carolyn mentioned, to John, Dan, and Dan, who really took the Dem Club's advocacy beyond just voting and endorsing candidates, but putting a lot of firepower, whether it was canvassing or mailers or otherwise, behind that endorsement and really helping get us over the top. And I'm very excited to play a role in supporting that effort going forward in 2024, when I think we have even more possibility to create a council that really reflects our values. So I'm just excited to be along for the ride, and I thank you.
Thanks so much, Jesse. And now we're going to hear from a couple of our rent control board candidates. Again, I wasn't surprised on election night to see the results for this one, because I knew that I voted for them. So that was good for them to win, but still excited for them to serve their full 4-year term. So first, let's hear from Erica Leslie.
Good evening. Thank you so much for everyone's support. We've actually made history. I'm the first Public Policy Institute student that graduated, that is going to hold this elected office. So I'm so proud to hold that, proud to be SMC. I will work my hardest and best for our renters and to make sure they have equitable outcomes. I will also consult you guys to make sure that, that we stay in touch and make sure that everybody gets their fair say. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Congratulations. And now the next candidate on the rent control board, the newest one, because of course, Erica and Kurt were already previously appointed, our own political action VP found time in his schedule to not only work the political action committee of this club, but also run his own campaign. Danny Ivanov.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say thank you to the entire membership for endorsing me, voting for me, placing your trust in me. I'm definitely, excuse me, very humbled and very honored to have earned your support. I'm very excited for the work ahead. It looks like measures RC and EM are going to pass. Excuse me. And it looks like I'm going to be having some new allies both on the board with Kurt and Erica, and with Carolyn and Jesse on the council as well. So I'm excited to get to work with you all, and thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. And Kurt couldn't be here tonight. For those who don't know, he's a TV producer. He's working on the American Music Awards, but obviously we'll be having him back at our next meeting. Let's move on to the school board. Our top vote getter there is Lori Lieberman. Lori, congratulations.
Thank you. I think that Richard had to sign off because he's in New York. So I want to make sure that that you know that I'm speaking for him in everything I say as well. We are so grateful to you for all your support, which I think really began with the questionnaire, which enabled all of us to really talk about our positions on the issues, our vision, our values, and our work in our schools and our community. So I really think that's important, and important to hold on to in the Dem Club. As I said, your endorsement meant so much to us both, along with the other endorsements, which were really important. So I do want to mention some of those other groups too, because many of you on this call are in some of those groups. There's a lot of overlap, and then there's some where there isn't. But SEPS, Forward, SMER, SMMCTA, SEIU, Unite Here, LACDP. I'm sure I'm missing others, but I do think we all benefited from all of those things. And I feel it's important to say that this election, I think, also shows that those groups all and their endorsements still mean something. And I think some people were questioning that, whether that would be true. And I think they do. And I think those groups are still widely trusted and for good reason. So I don't want to belabor all this. I'm honored. I personally am honored to be elected for a 4th term, and Richard is for a 3rd term. And again, to everyone in the club and in all those groups, thank you for anything you did in whatever way you did, whether it was canvassing, phone calling, emailing your friends, texting, just endorsing. Everything had a huge impact for us, and we are really, really grateful. And now it's time to go back to work and support all students in becoming what they all can be, and in becoming successful in their lives and contributors to a better world. And the one other thing I wanted to say is something I don't think we've done in the past, but that might be a good idea, would be to come back as school board members and update you periodically about what the district issues are, what we're doing that we want to spread more widely. Because I think one of the messages in this campaign was we all need to be doing that. We need to have people know more widely what we're about, what our district does, what are the challenges. And so I think starting here by having, you know, that opportunity, not every meeting, but at some kind of reasonable interval, I think would be great. So anyway, thank you again to all of you for everything. And there were a lot of really intelligent, I think, comments made earlier about some of what means, what the meaning is of all these election results. And I hope there will be ongoing discussion of that too.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much, Lori. And of course, we'll have to welcome Richard back at our next meeting to give his own remarks. But thank you so much. And
Yeah, he really wanted to stay awake, but it's 3 hours
the
later.
time difference. Yeah. Okay, so we'll now go all the way from Malibu. Please welcome Stacy Rouse.
Malibu, who is in San Diego tonight.
Oh,
So like Tony, I'm traveling. But thank you so much for your endorsement. I know that for several reasons, I was not fitting the lines that people expect. And it was a bit of an anomaly of how to take me and who would endorse me. And it caused a lot of discussions across groups. And I just appreciate the Democratic Club's process and kind of going a little bit against the grain and having a clear vision of you know what you were looking for and allowing that to come forward. And I am really excited to serve. It has been a protracted announcement, so it's strange to live in limbo for a week and see what's happening, but I'm really grateful to be going into my role. And I just want to say, just kind of the first things I hope to do as I start is first just to be better equipped for the role of board member. I know I'm going to be learning a lot. And I'm ready to continue listening to the different people in our school district, be they students or teachers or families or staff or community members. And I think what Lori was saying about the listening process, it's really important. No matter what we're actually doing, if people don't know it's happening or if they don't understand why, it can really be frustrating to people, and it can have a huge disconnect. So I'm excited to build some communication in new ways and connections like that. And then the third thing I hope to do is begin building connections across groups in our district in new ways and continue that work that's already being done. I really hope to help us shift how we view and engage conflict at all levels of our district. Increasing collaboration and inclusion really helps build healthy forms of conflict and decreases destructive forms of conflict. And sometimes we can make enemies even within our own groups by not respecting the fact that we're all passionate and we think we're getting exactly to the right place. And when somebody with equal passion gets to a different place, it can really frustrate us. So I'm really hopeful to work across our differences and engage our passions together to get two problems side by side instead of across each other. So I saw things in there about why would Malibu need representation if we're trying to leave. And I'm really grateful actually for bringing that question, because I don't know who else might be thinking that. And I think it's really important for everyone to be represented so we can have more meaningful conversations and really see. I can't possibly know what's going on in other places if I'm not told, and people can't know what's happening if they're not hearing from me. So I know it's late and we're all tired, but thank you again. I'm really excited for what we can all do together. And I hope we can start mending some fences going forward and working together in new ways. Because even across this, there are members in the Dem Club who are on opposite sides of things, and we're all Democrats, and we really need to work. And then once we're in office, we don't just represent Democrats, we represent everyone through the values we come from. And I do pledge to do that. So really nice to meet you all. Looking forward to get to know you better. Take care.
Thanks so much, Stacy. Congratulations. And now we'll go to Alicia Mignano.
Good evening, Democrats. I am so happy to be here with you tonight. And I also was experiencing the excruciating refresh button on election night. And I think that we had a great night as Democrats. And I am looking forward to working for our students and our families and our community. And some of the first things that I'm going to be doing is going to a conference and learning more about my role. I'm also going to be working on building relationships, and I am so grateful to have had the club's support. And this was my first time ever running. And so to be on the other side, to have to fill out that questionnaire, to have to go through that interview, to have to, I know that it was a big process for our club, but this is really important work. And I think this election really showed that. A lot of our races were really close, but the work that we do here as a club is important. And I am so grateful to be part of a club that is as active as we are, and that we supported candidates like Jade Chen and Christy Smith, and that we also supported progressive measures in California. So I am so excited. I am gonna work really hard, and thank you so much for your support. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Alicia. And we'll now hear from our College Board winners. And first of all, former president or co-president of the club, Shai Roy.
Thanks, John, and thank you to the club. Congratulations to all of the endorsed candidates from the club, whether you won or lost. Getting the endorsement from this club is very meaningful. From the Santa Monica Democratic Club. I want to say thank you also to the club for their support of the bond measure SMC. I think that it's great to live in a community that understands the importance of continual investment in the infrastructure of our public schools. It's not something where you build something and then you leave it be for decades. That's what we've done in this country. And that's how you get a crumbling infrastructure. And we're a little bit better than most communities in terms of, constantly reinvesting in that infrastructure, both at the school level and the college level. So thank you. I also wanted to congratulate Barry, Tom, and Nancy on their elections. And then finally, just in a sort of eyes wide open look, Tuesday was a great night last week was great for Democrats across the country. I will say that, whereas congressional Republicans didn't meet expectations in most areas of the country, and we exceeded expectations. When you leave the most progressive parts of California, Republicans did meet their expectations in Congress. And so I think as we go forward, if we had that same blue wave that we had 4 years ago, where Orange County, for example, turned blue, we wouldn't be looking at a small deficit in Congress. We'd be looking at a small majority. And so it's something to really think about as we go and organize going forward here in California, looking at those congressional districts every 2 years. So, but again, thank you to the club, and congratulations to all of the club's endorsed candidates.
Thanks, Shai. And now let's hear from Nancy Greenstein.
Nancy might be double zooming on another meeting, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. Well, why don't you shoot her a text? Oh, there she
No,
is.
no, I'm on this meeting now. My other, okay, I was on mute. Anyway, I wanted to reiterate the thank yous that you heard from so many people here. And to just say that the club has made such a difference this year. The precinct walking, the energy, getting us all out and about and really participating in the organizing and campaign was really, really added to the victory. And anyway, and I appreciate there's many people here who represent other organizations that also were helpful throughout this election. So thank you to all of you. And for me, I'm just, those of you know, I'm just really happy being a board member for the college. It's the only elected office I've ever wanted. And this gives me the opportunity for 4 more years to continue to serve the students and community of Santa Monica. The college is a treasure. And everybody's welcome to call me if they have any questions. I know I field a bunch during the election, and I'm happy to do so. And just want to reiterate to thank you for the bond, because I think we're all excited about being able to look at student housing, because our students have so many basic needs that need to be met. And this is so critical. So I can't think of anything that combines all our interests, education, diversity, inclusion, and housing. So this is great. And I also want to invite you to the film festival we're having at the college this year, the first time. And it's, as many of you know, it's Indigenous Peoples Month. And this film festival is called All My Relations. And it's podcasts, an art exhibit, and Native American, Indigenous populations films. And so it's Friday and Saturday, and it's at our college, and it's also at the JAMS Auditorium, an example of what we can do together. So I encourage you to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. It's so exciting. Speaking as a film school graduate, I know SMC just came out as one of the top film schools in the country, and my alma mater did not make the list at all. So it's very cool we have that resource here in Santa Monica. Yeah. And finally, this evening, another former member of our Dem Club board who just got elected, Tom Peters.
Well, thank you, Santa Monica Democratic Club, for your support. Thanks, John. Thanking the executive committee and all the volunteers during the election. It was wonderful. I'm looking forward to working throughout my 4-year term with the club, in particular with Dan on veteran affairs and Isabel on key legislative issues. Thanks, Lori, for mentioning all the other groups that endorsed us. It was of such great value. And I met this morning with Barry. We had breakfast, but he informed me he was going up to San Francisco with Margaret and some other trustees to a trustee convention. So he sends his thanks as well. And Louise, who's on this, Louise, thanks for the walks we had and the walks and talks, and I really enjoyed them. And I'm going to be walking a lot with Nancy. I already started, and walking her to the meetings like you used to do. Taking your baton with legislative issues. You did so much. I can't do all you did, but I'm taking on legislative issues, lifelong learning, and so many things that you contributed. So thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you and congratulations to everybody who won. Looking forward to working with everybody. We'll just a quick reminder that we're going to have our holiday party at Santa Monica Brew Works on December 11th. That's a Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Everybody bring your gifts. We're going to work with the Church in Ocean Park to deliver the gifts to deserving children in our community who aren't able to get them themselves. It's always one of our great traditions. We do it every year, election year, non-election year, going back for many years now. And also it's a great opportunity, you know, all these Zoom meetings that we have, we've had the opportunity to do some in-person stuff, but the holiday party is the biggest turnout one where everybody comes in person and we get to really see each other, and a lot of the animosity that happens sometimes in the Zoom meetings kind of dissipates because we are there in person. And it's really great to see everybody. And I also wanted to just say that starting the very beginning of next year, we're going to be working on converting into hybrid meeting format so that we'll be able to have some of that community again that's really been missing for the last few years. So we really love seeing the big turnout on Zoom. So we want to be able to create an opportunity where you can be in person, you can be on Zoom, and you'll have pretty much the same experience in either case. So we're working on how to do that. It's technically challenging, but we're going to figure it out. So stay tuned for that next spring. January will be our next membership meeting. Thank you, everybody, and have a great evening. Have a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you at the holiday party.
Thank you.